Okay, I think that's us. It's 10:30, so good morning members and welcome to Sederunt and to this meeting of this Harbours Sub Committee. I'd just firstly like to thank everybody that has travelled to Sederunt. It's great to have your Harbours Committee and see the water from our room, so that's brilliant. So first of all, can I just ask the clerk to give the Sederunt and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got 6 members present this morning and we have apologies from Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I would just actually say that because we're holding the meeting here in Sederunt, we are testing the portable equipment which has been provided from Dumfries, so we're hoping that it's going to work. It's recording everything, so any background conversations will be picked up, so just to make everybody aware of that as well. So, do we have any declarations of interest first of all? So we'll go on to item number 3, which is an update on the Harbour matters and designated person. There's a report by the Director of Corporate Services, and this report provides a general update on various matters relating to the Harbour services. Do officers have anything to add to the report at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just update you on a couple of points, but possibly before I do that, just to make sure you're aware of who the officers are at the end of the table. We'll take most of the questions in the report. You'll be aware of James MacLeod, Infrastructure Manager, Keith Armstrong Clark, the Regional Harbour Master, who's assisted in his team by Will Jones and Ian Cooper. And they'll deal with some of the detail in the reports as well as we'll answer members' questions. Just to give a bit of an update on the first report, which is an update on Harbour matters generally, there's a couple of items there. In terms of the designated person and the tender process, you'll be aware of David Foster has been working with us for the past 3 years as part of Marico Marine and giving us advice under the Port Marine Safety Code as the designated person, and really being there as being the challenge on our safe and efficient operation of the harbours in terms of the assessments and the audits that he carries out and the kind of expertise that he brings. So that's been re-tendered. We've got 3 tenders, 3 compliant tenders have been returned. Those are currently being assessed, and Ian and Keith are working with our procurement team in the council to assess those tenders, and it's on the basis of a 60% quality weighting, 40% financial weighting on the tender. So that tender process is in hand. They're almost close to a decision, and we'll make an appointment with the sign-off from our procurement team. We'll advise the subcommittee who that is going forward, because it will be important in terms of the relationship over the next 3 years that the duty holder this committee has with the designated person. The other matter I wanted to update the committee on was the Harbour Revision Order for Kirkcudbright, and there's probably not much more to add to what's in the report, except that there have been, in the report covers the fact that there's been a number of objections to the draft order from the RYA, who are an organisation, among other things, tend to object to every harbour revision order that's put out there and have something to say on behalf of their members. The council have formally responded through Transport Scotland, acting as almost a bit of a referee in the middle to move the order forward for us as part of the statutory process. The council have responded to the RYA on some of their objections and given them an agreement that they would move and make slight tweaks to the order on a number of them. That's covered in the report, and has also advised that a number of them, no, we won't change, and the reason that we have the order stating these things or presented in this way is set out. I understand the RYA have come back again on that response, and that is with Transport Scotland, who will give us an opportunity as the council to consider what the RYA have further said, and we will be in a position within the next week or so where we will actually go back and say, yes, we'll make further changes, or no, we won't make any further changes. And at that point, we understand that Transport Scotland are likely then to defer the order to Scottish ministers, with the debate on both sides about the objections that the RYA have to the draft order, and Scottish ministers will be in a position to make minor revisions if they so desire to the order, if they want to take on board what the RYA have said. So we're probably close to actually making the formal submission to Scottish ministers, which effectively means that it will go to their solicitors for consideration and for granting us the kind of approval of the final text to actually publish the order and make it. That was just the kind of 2 items to update.
Thank you very much. So having read through the objections from the RYA, I have noted that it's a very detailed response that the council have given, and I'm I'm delighted to see that. I think it's very clear how responsibility is responded and all the reasons are given. So I'm quite happy that the officers are dealing with that in the correct manner. I just wanted to ask one question myself before I open up to the floor and the other members. In regards to page 2 and 3.5, there's the navigational risk assessment, and I note that 50% of the costs were covered by the commercial ferry companies, the 2 commercial ferry companies. My question really is, how often is this assessment done? And in future, is the cost likely to be reduced if we then are only part of if we only take responsibility for the southern half of Loch Ryan? Because obviously at the moment, the Harbour Division Order covers all of it. Or the navigational assessment covers all of it. So my question was really twofold.
Can I sort of try and answer most of that?
Yes.
The regional navigation risk assessment for the whole of Loch Ryan was a big piece of work that was done by Marico, and that's the part that Sederunt and P&O subsidised, effectively came in with us as part of the costs. The latest review, I have done the latest review by going out and consulting with Sederunt, P&O and Harbour users, saying, do you think anything has changed, etc. And then I've looked at the scores and adjusted the scores. Part of the tender for the designated person includes a software package which will allow me in future, when I do the annual review, in fact I'll be able to take what I've done and put it into the new programme. I'll be able to actually do it electronically and quite quickly onto the software programme, which will give me the revised risk scores. And I don't know as we have the future, but the risk assessment we've got, I will do it in-house effectively with no need to charge anybody else.
And it's updated yearly, just to confirm.
Yes.
But the original order is just an update on that.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Is there any questions from any members? Yes.
More a comment, Chair, than a question. It's regarding, on page 5, we've got our customer feedback. I'd just like to congratulate the officers on how good our feedback is, especially in Sederunt. Believe me, it's difficult to please 56 people. It really is.
Especially in Sederunt.
Oh, can't comment on that.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
I note through the feedback forms there seems to be a pressing request for Wi-Fi in the harbours. Has that been looked into in any way and costed?
Yes, I'm currently in communication with another council officer. Chris Kirk. And Chris is due to come and see me at the Harbours to discuss this issue of Wi-Fi, how we can move it forward, both for Kubrick and for Stranraer.
Is there any timescale in that?
I can't give you a timescale at the moment, except I have requested Chris to come and see me, and I'll have a better idea then. So probably at the next subcommittee meeting, we'll be able to give you an update on that.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're looking, in terms of the Wi-Fi, we're looking to try and run I think the recommendation makes that point that we're not looking, agreed to pursuing options for Wi-Fi for Sederunt and Kubrick marinas on the basis of service that places no revenue implications upon the council. So that's where we would look to go forward with a Wi-Fi service, and it may be that looking at a private provision of that kind of service, so that a company comes in, provides Wi-Fi, and the users pay then for, if you're berthing at Kubrick overnight, then you pay a charge for the use of the Wi-Fi, and that cost will be met. But our challenge will be is that realistically the number of visitors we have at Kubrick will unlikely encourage many private suppliers of Wi-Fi to come in, because it's not going to be a particularly big earner for them, and if the data charges are high for usage, then people will probably just say, well, we'll use our 3G, 4G network if possible. What they're looking for a bit like, I guess, when you're at the house, what you're looking for is a high enough quality of Wi-Fi that you can watch Netflix or things like that when you're on your boat or staying overnight in a harbour.
So would a potentially better solution might be if the harbour area had a Wi-Fi hotspot provided by, say, BT that reached into the docking area of the harbour?
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing we could, you know, we will look at once we've investigated with BTS as to what kind of services can provide and how much they would cost to provide. I think the council in general have got private Wi-Fi provision in other locations now. In terms of, you know, it's not provided by the council, but it's within our facilities. So we're going to build on that model. The challenge comes is, do we have enough users for it to make anybody want to come in? Actually,
it's not without issues. At the British Marine Federation workshop I attended last year, there was some of the staff from managers from Troon and from Largs, and they said, you know, even though they've got it set up, if you get one or two boat owners decide to put on, you know, some great big movie sort of thing, that sort of can set the whole system dry. Someone else is trying to just log on and do a little, and it can, you know, use up all the allowance sort of thing. So we need to look at that side as well, make sure there's enough capacity on it. So we found issues with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Ingalls.
Yeah, just a quick question regarding the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. We're having difficulty getting responses from them. There seems to be a recurrent theme through here, especially if you look at Sederunt Loch Ryan Harbour Revision Order 314. Going back to May 2017, there looked to be some form of agreement, and then since then we've been asking for responses, but nothing's coming back.
yeah, I think that is a fair point, and actually it will be interesting moving forward, because we are due to write every 3 years. You'll see under 316, every 3 years we have to write to the MCA advising on compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code. Until now, we've not been able to advise them that we're compliant with the Port Marine Safety Code. This time we will be advising them on the advice from David Foster, our designated person, that we are compliant with the Port Marine Safety Code. So that's we shouldn't underestimate the amount of work we've seen over the last few years to get to this point. It's been a real big effort by Keith, but previously by Peter and by Keith and the team to get there. The outstanding matters are a harbour revision order for Kirkcudbright and a resolution of the matters in Loch Ryan. Kirkcudbright should be sorted quite soon. We'll get through the RYA issues. We will be writing to the MCA to advise them that we are compliant with the exception of Sederunt and Loch Ryan issues. And the reason we're not compliant with Sederunt and Loch Ryan issues is because they are unwilling to come to the table on with any great speed in reaction. So the director wrote to one of the directors in the MCA, got a response, was given a deputy director that we would be dealing with, and I've emailed him on a number of occasions, and we've had some response, and then he came back to me at the end of last year and said, I'm not going to be around for a while, and it's fallen again. And we continually invite them to Loch Ryan to understand the issues, to get a perspective on, that it's not Southampton, it's a couple of ferries, 3 times a day coming in and out of the harbour. It's a big open area. It's a real challenge to do something, and the challenge, well, from my point of view, the challenge is the longer we leave it, then the more we are eventually, through the laws of probability, something's going to happen. And when something happens, some incident happens that's significant, everybody will be looking around to blame somebody else for it. And I think we're at least now at the stage where we are really pushing on this is where we need the response. We need a pragmatic response from the MCA. So we'll keep at it. I would love to sort of say, if you could do something to help us to raise this matter, if that's where this conversation would potentially go. But
that's what I'm wondering here.
Yes.
If it would appear when you go through this document, there are various points in it where you're looking for a response from the MCA and we're not getting it, or it's taking a while. That one there in particular seems to have started in May last year, and we're looking for a response back from them, but it's not been forthcoming.
Well, Stephen and I went down to Southampton 2015, and we thought we'd made some progress then, and we did a navigational risk assessment, which is what Keith was talking about, what the Sederunt and P&O part funded. That was to show, what are the risks within the area, therefore how we should manage that. So the reason for a harbour revision order, or being a statutory harbour authority, is for safe navigation. So that's what we should be looking at, and our risk assessment showed there was very little risk, and only one went above where we needed to manage that, and that was a potential collision between two ferries. And we are managing that, or the ferry companies are managing that process. And having one statutory harbour authority for the whole of Loch Rann, in our view, is not going to change. It wouldn't have changed the incidents that caused the fatalities in 2003, and it wouldn't have changed the incident with regards to the wave wash that swamped a vessel in Lady Bay on the west side of Loch Rann. Neither of those would have been affected if we'd had a statutory harbour authority. And I don't. My problem is I don't think the MCA seemed to really grasp this. Having spoken to Captain Turner, who was our previous contact there, saying to him, that somebody can launch a boat, in Ayrshire, South Ayrshire, which is part of Loch Rann, and how if we had a harbour master at Stranraer, would that have any knowledge that this was happening? How would we know? And that's pretty much where the fatalities were occurred, at the very top end of the loch. So as tragic as it is, the only thing I can say a statutory harbour authority would be there for is to be blamed when something goes wrong, not to improve safe navigation, and that certainly is the view of Stenner and P&O as well.
Coming back to the committee papers and with that issue, would it be helpful if I wrote, or if I have my name written, or if I wrote as the chair of the Harbours Sub Committee to the authority to actually ask them to come back to the table and see if we can get this matter resolved, because it's clearly needing some movement forward. And actually, certainly in regards to the recommendations, 2.5 is to note that this issue, would it be, I would certainly like it with members' agreement to add to that we get a report back at the next committee to update what progress has been made, just for the actions and recommendations from today. But certainly in terms of writing to them as the chair of the Harbour Subcommittee, if that would be appropriate action and the committee's in agreement, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we will be writing, we've actually got a note in the diary, a note for next week to draft a letter for compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code, so advising that we're compliant. That will go to one element of, I don't know where the address is, but it will be in Southampton. It will go to a person within Southampton. But we can also take, and I think it will be Stephen as chief officer for the harbours who will sign that one off. But we will also send a copy of that letter with a piece of correspondence we will write on your behalf, which will say, look, we're telling your colleagues in another part of the MCA that we're compliant except for this. You're going to come to the table, come up to. I mean, Stenner and P&O have invited them. P&O invited them to fly to Ireland to take a ferry across to Stranraer or across to Kenryan to see the issues as you sail into the loch, to understand that.
Huge. Yes.
I think that's worth mentioning as well. James and I are due to meet with Stenner next week, so this will get covered again, and we'll regroup between ourselves next week as well as part of this. Because we're very, very keen.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All three Harbour authorities are very keen to get this sorted out.
Thank you. Is there any other members' questions at this point? No? Okay, in that case, shall we move to the recommendations for this item? So the recommendations are 2.1 to note, 2.2 to agree to receive the verbal update of tender, 2.3 is to note, 2.4 is to note, 2.5 is to note with the addition to receive a report at the next Harbour Subcommittee on the update. 2.6 is to note, 2.7 is to note, and 2.8 is to agree. Members quite content with that?
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, on to item number 4, which is the Harbour's financial position, revenue and capital. This report provides members with details of the revenue spent for the period of 2106, I think we might have a typo there, 2016-2017, and it also provides details of capital spend for 2016-17, current capital works for 2017-18, and the proposed programme for 2018-19. Do you officers have anything to add to this report?
Nothing from a target report, Chair.
Thank you. So, are there any questions from members? Yes,
Thank you. If you look at page 5. Just like to make some suggestions for future financial reports so that we've got adequate financial information to make the recommendations that we're being asked to make today. So if you look at the figures, there's an item with a double star there saying that all the staff costs, you could include all the costs associated with the regional harbour master. So what we're getting is sort of not an accurate picture of how each harbour is doing. If we want to say, well, if our aim is at one point in the future that all the harbours break even or make a surplus, then I think the harbour master costs should be spread to all the harbours, taking into account how much time over the year the harbour master spends dealing with the business of these ones, and that would give us a accurate picture of how each harbour is particularly doing. We've been asked to make some recommendations today on the fees, so it'd be good in the income column. These were broken down into the base items we've been asked to discuss. So the landing fees, pontoon berth fees, dry mooring fees, and winter income. Maybe a way of breaking that down so that we can make informed choices in the future. Also, we're asking. We've increased the landing fees to 2%, but it'd be interesting to see how that has affected our income, whether the cost of fish has gone up and it's actually boosted our income considerably, or it stayed the same. That's back out for the moment.
Thank you. The officers want to come back on any.
I mean, I think first of all, in terms of the profit and loss table 1, this is obviously a first attempt at trying to provide this level of detail. It is a challenge from the point of view of us providing you quite a lot of detail on revenue matters, which are normally, delegated to officers to manage. So, but we felt it was useful so that you saw it, because you have a responsibility for the how monies are spent on safely, managing our harbours. So we've tried. It's a first attempt at that. I think in terms of Richard's comments, Councillor Brodie's comments about the spreading of the regional harbour masters' costs across the 5 harbours, I think that's not unreasonable, and I think we can probably have an indication. I think the simplest way will be an indication of how much time Keith spends on a monthly basis at each of the harbours, and then we'll just divvy up the time between it rather than keeping detailed timesheets. Some of the stuff that he does in terms of the Port Marine Safety Code applies to all the harbours, so there's always going to be that kind of overhead anyway. The costs associated with staff are dated because this is a profit and loss account for 2016-17, and we've seen subsequent to that a sort of better management of the harbours in terms of where our staff are. So we're no longer attributing. We've won Harbour Observer that covers the 3 Macas harbours, for example. So you'll see a reduction in staff costs for the 3 Macas harbours because we've got 15 hours in total down there for one Harbour Observer, whereas we'll see an increase in costs against Sederunt and Kirkcudbright if we followed exactly the same layout. If we start spreading the costs of the regional harbour master across all 5, that will change it a little bit. So yeah, I don't see a particular problem with that. In terms of, you were asking about whether our increase in fees had generated further income. I'm not sure we're in a position, because we're not in a position yet to say fully where we are.
I do have it on diary to get to the 31st of March, so we get this year's figures and then do the same exercise again, and any tweaks that you require, and produce the figures for the current financial year, so we can have some comparison regarding, where we were 18 months ago, where we are currently. I think it's worth mentioning landing fees as well. The Isle of Man quota issue, we believe, has certainly impacted on the levels of the landings certainly through Kakubri. So, you know, again, we won't be having a direct comparison year on year because the actual underlying landing will be less this year because of the quotas.
Just on that point, I would confirm that I have been liaising with my colleagues regarding the issue around the scallop farming and the economic impact of the decision that the Isle of Man has made on this, and certainly the advice that I've been given is this is being looked at within the EEI sector, and rather than coming to the Harbours Sub Committee, because I had actually sought advice to ask whether it was appropriate that we got a report here today on the impact of that decision made by the Isle of Man government, and I've been assured that it's actually going to EEI, and Jan is working with both leader and deputy leader of the council to find a solution and a way forward, and in fact it's gone right the way to First Minister, who has also been involved with this. So although it's not forming part of the committee today, it's very much been on the agenda, and I've been advised that it's being dealt with in the correct manner. But does that answer your question, going back to Councillor?
Yeah, just a wee bit more breakdown in income, so
Absolutely, I think it's great to be clear with the information, but more transparency on the actual details. Then the members have the choice whether they want to actually read all that data or choose not to, but actually be able to have access to it is really useful. But appreciate that it's the first time that this type of information has come to the committee.
Sorry, I think if you want to come back with further suggestions as to what other information we can provide, we will say,
yep.
I'll be open and honest with you and say, sorry, I'm not going to be able to provide that level of detail, or the amount of time to provide it is not going to be useful. I think in general, it's useful to do this, and it's useful to see how much it costs, and you can see that the overall cost, the net loss for operating the service is 104,000, and you know there might be a knee-jerk reaction to say, well, what can we do to increase our income to therefore, you know, reduce this down, and that, while I'm not suggesting that we don't look to that, I also think we need to look to the fact that this 2016-17, that 104,000 supported 100, 200 jobs in the fishing process in Kakubri. And for a £100,000 investment from the local authority to support 200 fish processing jobs probably is a good investment from any local authority for the economy. So pushing up landing fees may bring that figure down, but it may also start making people think, well, actually we're better to land in another location. So we need to push it, and what you'll see from this, particularly on the mariners, is we have a 100% waiting list at Kakubri and a 50% waiting list at Stranraer. And when you've got that kind of situation, that's where you say, well, let's sweat this. You know, if you can afford how much is a big boat down at Stranraer?
The biggest one is about £300,000 was the most expensive one we're aware of.
I think
it's probably in the £20,000 or £30,000 bracket.
I think it'll be useful as time goes on to get the trends, and I think to get the trends will be useful, but I'd say we appreciate this the first time that this information has come to committee. I've got a question from Councillor Young and then yourself, Councillor Ingalls.
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree. My question was very much based on what Councillor Brodie's already brought forward. But if you look at the table on page 35, the fourth column, the costs in expenditure in the rates box are costs incurred by the Harbour. If the Harbour didn't have any landing, there'd be certain fixed costs like rates, and then there's additional costs incurred because boats are using the Harbour. You know, their electricity, their water, their services, if you like. I wondered if that could be split further to have the fixed harbour costs and then the extra costs caused by the landing fees and the berthings at the harbour. Secondly, income. That 96,500 represents both landing and berthing fees. Further on in the narrative, it tells us that the berthing fees are about 31,000, which means the landing fees are 65,000. So that means every week you're getting about £1,200–1,300 in landing fees. For how many boats? Is it 6 boats, 8 boats? 15 boats. So it's about £100 per week per boat.
Having said that, it will require more breakdown than that, because obviously there's an exodus of boats in the summer.
towards the east coast.
Mhm.
So it is.
I know
Based
that,
on-
so I'm aware I'm simplifying a very complex situation.
No, but it
you
should
know,
be pretty easy to break down. But there are a lot of boats away in the summer,
Mhm.
and more tend to be at home in the winter. Having said that, we had a lot more Kukubri-based boats in Kukubri this summer just gone than we had in the summer before. So, but I mean, we should be able to break that down week by week pretty easily, shouldn't we?
We could do, we could possibly bring record the landing figure sort of separately, we could bring that as an appendix, because we have those details separately. Certainly if you we have those separately. It's really a case of what detail you want to go to and how much time it's going to take to do it.
Okay, Councillor Ingalls.
Yeah, I would presume that we're very unlikely to ever break even with the income that we receive from the harbours. Given what's happening in Isle of Man, it could impact fairly seriously over the next year on income, landing fees at Kukubri.
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that one, to be honest, with the current situation. I would hope that the intervention of the First Minister has put this under control now, and that we will see landing figures in future either be what we've had over the last 12 months or increase back up again. But we don't know. Some of these quotas and that, even for other sectors, Isle of Man waters, they're agreed last minute and they can change overnight.
Right.
So you can't say at the beginning of the year that we're going to have that level of landing, because there's so many other factors that come in. Even things like just like the weather. A couple of years ago, the boats were basically sat in the whole of December. They were sat in port because the weather was atrocious.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah. So.
The other thing, Councillor Ingram, was talking to the skippers on the dock and the men working the boats, is yes, the weather's always going to impact, and there's going to be a certain number of days a year you can't fish. But the thing the guys are talking about on the dock is there going to be anything there to catch? And they're worried about stocks. That is for sure. There's pressure on them to go fishing. Of course there is from the owners of the boats, and they're putting pressure on themselves to go fishing because if they don't fish, they don't earn any money. But there is definitely pretty uniform concern about stocks. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
So can I just ask?
Yes,
one more?
absolutely.
The rates that we're charging, I presume that these rates, the increase in these rates are taking us to a level which is in comparison to other harbours, not necessarily in our area, but other harbours close by.
When the rates were increased last year, I did a lot of work comparing both the commercial fees and the marina fees. And certainly our commercial fees are still below what they are in a lot of other Scottish fishing ports. Landing fees, a lot of places are 3 or even over 3% landings. And again, it's up for discussion and decision whether you or the council members want to take that any higher. But bear in mind, we just doubled the landing fees, and bearing under pressure, then I would suggest that it's probably going to leave it at 2% for quite a long time. I think the issue really lies on the marina side, where, to be frank, we are not a Premier League side across our marinas. We don't provide a Premier League service. We are probably first division or championship players, and we need to pitch our prices accordingly. But when we compare ourselves to the likes of Maryport and even directly with the likes of Largs and Troon, who are the Premiership players, we are a long way short of what they are charging. And you need to bear in mind the ongoing infrastructure costs. When the gentleman from GSS Plant did the marina inspections, he indicated to me that the pontoons at Kukubri, whilst they're in pretty good order and it lasted quite well, we probably need to be looking at the replacement of the marina and the piles in about 5 years' time, and Stranraer's probably got 10 years. Well, that is a significant capital investment, and when you look at places like Troon and Largs, when they are charging, say, £300 per metre, that price includes the depreciation of the current asset and also saving up in the piggy bank so that they can replace their pontoons and their infrastructure every 20-25 years. And I'm not sure our prices at the moment cover or make an allowance for that. Certainly, there isn't enough in our fees to allow for the fact that we are going to have to fork out from somewhere.
Yeah, just, you know, the investment that's going to go in here, that we're putting into the harbour here, and the possibility of extending the harbour, you know, the marina side of that, and there's a waiting list down here, and there's a waiting list at Kirkcudbright. You know, is there, I know that we've increased these by 10% year on year, from last year to this year, I think that's right. Yeah, to the penny, I notice it's not even rounded up, which, being in business, I would have rounded it up, but anyway, are we, what we are charging, they're getting good value for money? You know, is there room to increase it more than 10%, would you say?
I can give you my view, which is probably, yes, there is room to increase it, but I wouldn't recommend that you do it just in one big foul swoop. I would recommend that we do it proportionate over a couple of years, and so we can sort of see what happens to the waiting list as we start to increase things. We can see where the balance point is. I know places like Girvan put in pontoons, and they just shot the prices right the way up. Well, they've got vacant spaces because they've overcharged for their pontoons, and where there's some vacant pontoon berths, it's true because they overcharge. We need to be careful that, you know, we don't say we want 40%. I think we need to be sensible.
I think that slow increase to get us to a level where we feel we really should be is sensible.
If you look at, there's an annual report in Practical Boat Owner magazine, which is one of the, you know, and there's a table in there which gives comparative cost for the southwest, and they list all the south coast marinas, and they list all the North Scottish marinas, and traditionally, Kirkcudbright certainly has been right the way down the bottom of the list.
So can I just confirm that we're agree, I mean, the recommendations today at 2.3 is to agree a recommendation to the EEI committee about setting the fees for 2018-19, but we will be looking to review these year on year. So that although these are the recommendations for today, we will be coming back to this time, I presume well, can I just confirm, will it be this time next year that we'll be looking once again at this issue on a yearly basis?
Our view, Stephen and I were discussing in the car on the way over as well, was that bringing a particular paper with a capital element to it as well, this time of the year works well for EEI setting a capital programme in March, so that the infrastructure asset class, the coastal line within the coastal and harbours line within that, we can identify those, and we will have a short section of text that will say that the proposals for investment in the harbours, not the coastal infrastructure as in, you know, sea defences for a section of road, but within the harbours has been agreed by the Harbours Sub Committee, and that should lend some additional weight to the decision that's then taken by. So yes, we would see a finance report coming each.
I've got Councillor Young, but just quickly, if you want.
Yeah, it might be interesting, Chair, if we had some comparative costs from other harbours in the document that we can look and see how we compare, as opposed to Maryport or Girvan or whatever it may be, in relation to these visitor rate pontoons and annual fee for the pontoons.
If we could request that for the next time we're looking at reviewing the cost, that would be useful to have that.
I think we did that when we set them in the last time. So when I went to EEI before, we provided a comparison table of costs, which was a reason for setting the fees as they currently sit.
I've still got that. I think I've still got a table. So if you wish me to circulate that, there was historic information. It would give you a feel for it.
That would be useful, and I'd just actually also like to say it's really useful to get a report that, you know, all the committee members get from yourself. So thank you for that. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Just really for clarification, I know in Kirkcudbright the providers of services to the boats that are tied up in harbour are provided with a key to get through the raised arm thing. I just wondered if any other harbours charge these providers of, say, diesel or welding services to the boats while they're in harbour, charge the service providers for accessing the harbour area? Because the harbour's a facility that the council provides and other companies use to service the boats, but we really get nothing back from the diesel tankers or the welders, or yet we're providing them with a place where they can provide services to the trade. I just wondered if you should have or could have an annual charge of, say, £50 per key to raise the arm in the night.
We have made a decision to charge them for the card because the cards keep going missing and get lost on a regular basis, and they do cost us about £5.50 a card. So we're charging them. I forgot what the fee was. Now. £10 a card to cover. That's. But if you wish me to look at to speak with colleagues in the industry to find out whether there are charges elsewhere, I can do that.
I think what we would generally find is some things are met in the costs, so that the 2% landing fees are reflecting the costs of the services that they get, because we also provide a waste disposal service as well. If we don't provide a waste disposal service on the quayside, so skips for waste coming off the boats, then the cynic in me says that some of that material may disappear. You know, if we would start charging as an individual rate for that, the cynic in me says some of that might not ever make it as far as the harbour to be disposed of. Not that I'm suggesting any of our boats would dispose of it offshore, but you know, if we offer, it's that balance as to, you know, if we start charging for this, do the keys just get handed out? You know, we lose the keys. So it's, you know, if we can keep it within the general fees.
If you're content with the present system.
I think it's useful to have a balance.
Yeah.
If we're striking that balance, then that's fine. But if there's an option that could be possibly looked at. Councillor Jody.
Yeah, I think rather than working on a year-to-year basis, we should be coming up with a plan to bridge the gap between income and expenditure. There will be harbours in Scotland which make a surplus. The ideas are probably out there how we could be innovative and use this asset to get more income. So I think we need that plan. We need to learn from other people as well.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
I think picking up on that point, it's easy to say that the mariners are, particularly the mariners, are something where if you can afford a £300,000 boat, then we should be charging you a lot of money for having so much disposable income that you can have in your lifestyle, a £300,000 boat. I imagine most of us sitting around the table here are thinking they're probably not within my. But on the other hand, I think that particularly with Stranraer, an engagement with the schools, the sailing club and things like that, what we shouldn't be doing is making sailing an elite sport, because it doesn't need to be an elite sport, and we shouldn't be people being put off by coming to, you know, yeah, they can sail a topper or a mirror or something like that and run it down the slipway or chuck it off the beach, but you know, if they're put off before they even get to that, because the image is, you know, you've got a £100,000 yacht down there or things like that, then we're not getting Stranraer Academy to get involved with the sailing club to do these kind of things. If we do that with Stranraer Academy, and we work better with the you know, have the southern end of the loch as the area we're controlling. We've got the skiff, the international skiff competition coming in 2019.
July 2019.
You know, these kind of things, and getting Stranraer on the circuit for different, you know, yacht racing and things like that. It's, you know, we bring it in a different way. You know, everybody can afford to sail if that's what your priority is. If we scare them off by having, you know, sweating them as much as possible because you can afford a yacht, therefore we can charge you a lot of money, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, and it becomes unsustainable going forward as these people move out of sailing and into motor racing or something else that takes their fancy. So yeah.
I think striking the balance is the key to that we need to be mindful of.
Just mention on that, I think it's worth bearing in mind as well. We do have the cheap seats, as I call it. I remember the cheap seats, which is the mud moorings. We don't have any at Stranraer, but the other harbours we have them, and there's virtually no waiting list to Kukubri. The moorings are full, but there's no waiting list, and I do have vacancies at some of the Macca's locations. So it's worth bearing in mind as well. If you know, there are other options to go sailing the old traditional ways, which you row out to your boat and you can keep it. In my boat, for instance, cost me I think £150 a year to keep on the mud mooring. Well, that is very tenable from my point of view. And my boat on the pontoon would cost about £700 a year.
Yeah.
So there are other options for people who wish to take them.
Thank you. Councillor Justy.
Chair, I'm coming back to pricing here, and it's a case of looking at our waiting lists and listening to the officers. A 10% increase doesn't really seem that much, considering what other harbours are charging. Would 15, maybe 20% be out of the question? Do you think that would lose us business, or would that put us in an equilibrium?
I
think we need to bear in mind the prices went up 16% at the beginning of the last financial year, although I can report that I didn't really get any. Did you get any particular negative feedback? I didn't get a great deal of negative feedback.
I think in terms of being mindful of that, and certainly is the point that Councillor Ingles made and similar, I think if we're coming back to review this, because there is, I certainly feel that, you know, if this has been done in a measured way and year, we can get to the point, and actually what Councillor Fjordy was saying about having a long-term plan of actually this is where we are, and this is where we'd like to get to, and how do we get that in terms of increasing the fees incrementally. I think, you know, for risk of people going, well, actually that's done, you know, too quickly. But certainly I'm interested to hear people's feedback on that and officers' thoughts on that.
So yeah, it's just what we've been asked to do is agree the rates to the EEI committee. As a Harbour Sub Committee, we've been asked to recommend that these are accepted.
Yep.
So, is it? Do we have that power to say, well, we think we should add 15% on this year rather than 10%, or are you happy in the position that you're in at the minute, adding a 10% fee for this coming year?
On this, we're not actually being asked to agree the fees, we're being asked to recommend the fees. So we agree to recommendations rather than the actual fees.
But as a Harbour Sub Committee Chair, we've been asked to recommend these fees to EEI.
Yes.
But just before you come in with the same point, just the difference between a 10% increase and a 15% increase in the grand scheme of council budgets is going to be quite small. Even in the relative to this budget, it's going to be quite small. But politically, you know, to a small p, 10% is probably more easy for us to sort of say we do 10% this year and 10% the following year, and we just keep doing it like that. The bigger we put it, actually, it's going to look as though, you know, going 16% one year, 15% the next. We will get some increase. What it's doing is setting an agenda that says we are going to be increasing this, and we're going to see what impact that has dropping off. Going to 15% is not going to bring us a lot more income to make it worthwhile. You know, meaning next year we'll have to go back to 5% because we've annoyed so many people. I know that would be my feeling based on what I had to look at costs previously.
In terms of the recommendations, I mean, I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations. I've got Councillor Young, but we've, you know, discussed this quite fully. But I'll take one more question.
Right, it's just a small point, quite trivial. Page 39, we're looking at costings of work to be done in future years. And I know it's trivial in comparison to the £1 million for replacing pontoons. But Sederunt are 25 metres of mesh fencing for £5,000. That's £200 per metre. That seems incredibly excessive for mesh fencing, which is normally about £30 or £40 a metre.
This one here.
Just a comment.
I mean, that is at the moment, that item has not been fully priced at. That is just an estimate figure, and obviously that has to go out and be priced properly and tendered appropriately.
How much? Sorry, how much were we talking about? We were looking at Harris panels to buy in, weren't we? And that was coming in about.
Harris fencing, yes.
Just as
that was about 105 metres. Buying that in Harris fencing was going to cost about £1,000, just under £1,000.
I mean, what we're looking at, the problem we've got is it's a section of fencing at the end of the knuckle to prevent access to the marina. And what we found is that the quality, because of the marine environment, doesn't last very long. So I suspect that when we've asked for a price from engineering design, an approximate price for that, we're expecting something that's going to cope better with the marine environment. And I suspect that price will be based on a similar cost for doing the area around the hard standing. But we could possibly get an economy of scale because, as you see, we're looking to extend the hard standing area anyway, so we would pick that up in the same contract if we did. But yeah, I mean, yes, as you say, it's part of it when you compare it to a new marina at Kakubri.
Can I just come in, Chair? Just,
Absolutely.
I think in terms of future capital programming, in terms of how we normally report capital programs to committee, looking so far in advance, these are estimates, and they're probably upper estimates that we can manage, you know, within the budget thinking going forward. And you know, as Keith says, it will be tendered. If we don't think we're getting value for money, you know, we can step back in terms of the costs that we're prepared to accept.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, or can we move to the recommendations? Yep, okay, so our recommendations are 2.1 to note, 2.2 to note, 2.3 to agree.
On 2.3, to go through these individually, so we can agree them, or?
If members would like, we can go through them individually. Yep, so 2.1 is to note the requirement of the duty holder to set out dues at a level which adequately funds the discharge of all its duties as detailed in paragraph 3.1.
I was just 2.3, I want you to go through.
Oh, 2.3, right. Okay, yes, right. Okay, so we note 2.1 and 2.2. 2.3, so we're agreeing as detailed in the paragraph 3.7 to 3.14 to recommend to the EEI committee the setting of fees for 2018-19 as follows: that the landing fees remain at 2% of gross value.
Agreed.
Increase in the pontoon berth fees of 10% as detailed in table 2. Dry mooring fees remain at current rates.
I want to ask a question that whether we should be increasing it by inflation. Obviously, our costs are going up, and I think even may only be
We've got a waiting list. We've not got any waiting list for
Yeah,
these,
but
so
we've got increased costs, so who's going to pay for those? Is it the council taxpayer, or is it the people who are using it? So I think we should put them up by 3% or 2.5%, whatever inflation is. Because we've got increased salaries and to pay for.
are members in agreement with that we put it up by?
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, I think that.
What percentage are you proposing?
3%.
3%. Are officers happy to note that into their recommendations?
That seems
There's no concerns.
reasonable, yes, I think
That's
it's
fine.
you have to declare a vested interest since you have a boat on the mud mooring.
Yeah,
2%, 1%.
Okay, so we're amending the third point, so dry mooring fees would increase by 3%. And the fourth point is a winter package of 6 months for the price of 4 months is made available to all boat owners.
There's also on 3.13 the mention of charges for services at Stranraer boatyard for crane transport of cradles and storage. We reduced it by 20%. What would be the effect if we put it up by 3%? The crane.
Sorry, what page are you on?
It's 36, 3.13.
Ah, there we are, 3.13, yes.
The charges for the hard standing and the boatyard operations were set in comparison with similar fees at other boatyards. So they were pitched when we went in originally to set those fees at EI. They were pitched at a reasonably commercial level. I do get quite regular feedback that the fees are at the commercial level for what we're providing, and the reason why we've put the recommendation about the 6 months for the price of 4 is that competitors such as Ardrossan is the main one. They do a winter package where it actually works out a fraction cheaper. If you have a boat, you pay the annual fee on the pontoon at Stranraer, and then you go and take up the Ardrossan package, which is a one-off fee for picking your boat up, putting it in the hard standing, storing it, putting it back in the water again. If you do that with Ardrossan, compared with keeping your boat at Stranraer and putting your boat in our hard standing for 6 months, lifting it out, etc., and we charge our published rate, we come out about £100 more expensive, which is why we've recommended about a slight discount to make it at least the same as Ardrossan. So from my point of view, having looked at the prices, there's not a lot of wriggle room at the moment on the hard standing fees. But again, like other fees, I think it's part of the annual review that I recommend that a comparison is done and see whether there is any room for manoeuvre. Whether we're deliberately set at a more commercial rate.
I'm happy then to go with that based on the view that we are sitting where we should be in terms of commercial pricing. Are members quite happy to agree with that?
Agreed.
I think we should look at it in the future though,
So
because obviously our competitors will be putting up their prices.
Yeah, can I just check, we're putting up mud mooring fees at 3%?
Our recommendation
Yes,
is
yeah,
to put 3%.
Yes, but from the point of view of we're not suggesting that we should be putting up generally our fees by 3% because of for this particular
No,
one.
it was more in relation with the mud mooring fees and to agree that the 6 months for the price of 4 months package.
I mean, there are, we should understand, and I don't know whether it's particularly clear in 313 that anybody that takes a winter package is still paying their marina fees even if their boat's not in the water. If they pay a year's marina fees and then they pay more to have their boat out over winter. From our point of view, there's actually a benefit to that from the operation of the harbour point of view, because if you have boats out of the marina, if you get bad weather coming, then you've got more area to play with to move boats around that have chosen to stay within the water. So we should be, you know, our fees for the hard standing should be seen to be encouraging the use of the hard standing.
Quite a bit of discussion, etc., with some boat owners, etc., around this, the fees for a hard standing, and there has been a view, well, why don't you charge an overall package? If you look at the prices for likes of our Drosten and Troon and Largs, etc., I mean, they're all completely different. Some have a winter package, some don't have a winter package, some have an annual rate like we have, but then they have an annual rate which will also include the storage ashore, so you can either be in the water or on the hard standing, and that's all included in the one price. And then other places will have a summer package which is 6 months on the water, so you pay substantially more in the summer between 1st of April and 31st of October, and then there's a cheap winter rate. So again, when I come to compare things, sometimes it's very difficult to give a direct comparison. I say this one about the winter storage is one that's come out because our Drosten charge is slightly different. It's come out that we're a bit more expensive. But my view at the moment is that say I've come under some pressure. Oh, you should put together an all-inclusive price. And I think, to be fair, people are looking for discounted rates and a lot cheaper rates from us. But my view is, the hard standing storage, we want to encourage use of that, but it is an extra service, and if you wanted to use that extra service, like anything else, you should pay for that additional service.
I think we've had a really robust debate, and it's been really useful to have your input for that. I would be keen, again with members' permission, to add another recommendation on here, that when we're looking at reviews next year, that we get comparison data, so we can actually have that information prior to the committee, because obviously you've got a really good working knowledge of that, which we don't have. So actually to have that in an appendix of just what other harbours are doing and where we compare.
I can certainly do that. If any members want to have a look in the meantime, all the marina rates for Largs, Troon, etc. are available online. If you just Google it, it will come up and you can look at it quite easily online.
Thank you. So are we quite happy then, as it stands and as we've agreed on 2.3 to move forward? And then on 2.4, we're looking to note the progress on the current capital works programme. Agree in 2.5 as detailed in paragraph 3.18 to table 4 to recommend to the EAI the inclusion of the proposed capital works. 2.6 to also note the future programme of capital works. 2.7 to note the need for CCTV improvements and request for Wi-Fi as detailed in the paragraphs. And 2.8 to note the changes in the quotas imposed by the Isle of Man as detailed in paragraphs 3.24 to 3.28 and the impacts. And then a final recommendation, 2.9, that for future, I'll look for governance for the advice on the wording of this, but that we have comparison data provided for future settings of fees. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, I have no other urgent business to discuss. At this point, we would then go into the Local Government Act of 1973 and consider the adoption of resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A 4 and paragraphs 9 of part 1 of the Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. are we happy to?